One of the biggest frustrations every jungler faces is when they're in a game where it feels like every single one of the enemy jungler's ganks work. Meanwhile, when you path to a lane, it feels like you've walked through 50 wards, sirens are blaring, and your opponents are playing the safest a league player can possibly play. It's really frustrating, especially because it can happen when it's not even your fault. There's all sorts of players in League, and you don't know what type of laners you're pathing to. You might have decided to clear down towards a Draven lane, but this random player is just the most disciplined, non-aggressive Draven you've ever seen. What you thought would be a free gank turned out to be a complete waste of time. Meanwhile, your opponent pathed to your top laner, and they're literally proxying between the enemy towers before they're even level 6. And you're just sitting there like, how could I have known that? We're not going to tell you that you can avoid these types of games. You will be behind the enemy jungle sometimes because your ganks fail and their ganks are all working. However, the players who climb are the ones who know how to play around this issue and can come back and win the game regardless. So let's break that down. To deal with most problems, the first step is to break things down and ask yourself, what is the actual issue I'm facing? Your opponent's ganks working has some consequences, but you'll see that once you break them down, that there's a ton of simple solutions that you can use to fix a situation. To begin with, the most obvious and annoying problem that you have to deal with is your opponent having a small item lead over you. In the jungle, this can be quite frustrating. For example, let's say the enemy Graves got a gank off over you and has a longsword advantage now. Jungle is a tempo-based role. Graves is now clearing his jungle faster, which lets him get around the map more, letting him score more ganks, take scuttles, etc. When your opponent has an item lead, even if the advantage is minor, it can sometimes snowball out of hand. Not only are they faster, but they can also begin to bully you off of your own camps too. You'll now have to be way more careful about invades, counter ganks, etc. Okay, so the enemy jungler is stronger than you. There's also one other obvious problem. So now, not only do you have to deal with them, but their strong teammate too. Now you have to suffer through them having priority, so you'll have a harder time contesting things. Not only that, but you'll feel pressured to save your teammate from falling even further behind. And that's kind of it. Those are the main problems of being behind on ganks. Now, we're not going to tell you that there's some easy tactic that lets you make a speedy comeback every single time. You're definitely at a disadvantage because you got unlucky. But if you keep your cool, there's definitely some things you can do about these problems that give you a very good fighting chance. And also, if you're serious about dominating jungle for Season 13, then now is the best time to join Skillcapped and enroll into our world-class jungle courses. Learn the best jungle routes, how to clear camps with challenger speed, how to always make the best decisions, what to do when laning phase ends, how to smurf out of low elo, and so much more. It's all waiting for you right now on our platform. And if you don't climb at least 5 divisions this season while actively using Skillcapped, then you can claim a refund anyways, so check us out after this. Anyways, back to learning how to deal with being outganked. Let's begin with the issue of a fed enemy jungler, and once we cover that, we'll talk about how to deal with their winning lanes too. You have to keep in mind that when your counterpart is strong, it is not nearly the same as when a laner's opponent gets ahead. For example, a mid laner like Zed who gets kills will make it impossible for their opponent to get much done. They'll win every trade, have permanent priority, etc. There's a lot more direct confrontation that goes on in lanes. As a jungler, you're a bit fortunate that you don't actually interact with your opposing counterpart for a large part of the game. If they're strong, it doesn't mean that you yourself are weak. That's a key difference between junglers and laners. What this means is that although you may not be able to interact with your opponent, you can still get a lot done on the map. So simply put, you're still very impactful and strong as long as you avoid directly confronting your counterpart. As an example, let's take a look at this Viego game. It's clear that the Lilia is wildly ahead of Viego. She's got more ganks that have worked out and has snowballed a bit off of it. Knowing this, Viego is going about his route when he spots Lilia on the map ganking mid. This is what you're looking for. Spotting the enemy jungler who is stronger than you can give you the confidence to go for your own play without having to worry about something like a counter gank. Viego does not miss this timing and heads towards bottom to set up a gank. His bot lane goes in and Viego completely obliterates the enemy Jinx and Soraka for stepping slightly out of line. These two concepts are precisely how you can get back into a game, even when your opponent is strong. 1. Try to avoid falling behind yourself. When the enemy jungler gets fed for no reason, many players can often tilt over the fact that they're losing scuttle crabs or objectives that they can't prevent. They end up dying and becoming much weaker. Guys, junglers are really strong even when they don't have many kills. You are a laner's worst nightmare. Rewatch this Viego play. He had a single kill to his name, but Viego completely demolished this bot lane. This is the most important thing to remember. If you don't fall behind, your ganks are way more likely to work out because of how naturally strong most junglers are. So stay cool and don't die like your teammates. And besides that, just try to avoid getting counter ganked. With decent map awareness, this won't be a huge problem, and you can still have a lot of game impact. Okay, cool. You're not weak and you can still gank. That's nice, but the enemy jungle is still strong. They're clearing really fast, scoring more ganks, etc. What do you do about that? The thing to keep in mind about an enemy jungler being ahead is that yes, they will out-tempo you, but it only really matters if they actually pressure with their advantage. There's two major ways that an enemy jungler can use their lead to really stifle your ability to come back into a game. We discussed this in our other guides, but a huge mistake junglers make in Diamond and below is not exerting their lead to shut down an enemy jungler. When you're ahead, one of the best ways of winning the game is to not focus too much on what you want to do. Rather, you should try your best to shut down anything the enemy jungler wants to do. For example, this Hecarim has a lead over the enemy Udyr. He could outpace the Udyr through farming and ganks, but the Hecarim would rather shut down any chance of the Udyr even being in the game. So he invades and there's nothing the Udyr can do about it. This is one of the best ways of turning a lead into a guaranteed win. It's not about making your own plays, but denying your opponent the opportunity to ever get back into the game in the first place. But remember, we just said that this is something a lot of lower rated players don't do. You guys have no idea how many games we watch of gold and platinum junglers who are ahead and just keep clearing their own jungle. Look at this Trundle. He's a powerful duelist with a lead over the Kindred. He's got mid and top priority at the moment, and he's still not moving in to invade Kindred's red side jungle. He's just content to trade camps. Yes, he does his camps slightly faster due to his lead, but it's putting no pressure on the enemy jungle. As a result, Kindred is able to get things done on the map and make plays that enable her to come back, like taking Rift Herald and the first tower. Looping back to our main point, when you're behind, yes, getting invaded like this might happen to you, but from what we've observed, more often than not, players just don't push their leads that hard in lower elo brackets. It means you don't need to freak out, you're not going to get invaded, harassed, etc., and you can chill and make comeback plays, just like this previous Viego example we watched. But okay, let's say you're versus an aggressive player who is in your face. They're trying to invade, take your camps, etc. It does happen, obviously, so what do you do then? Well, there isn't much you can do. Put yourself in the jungler's shoes who managed to get ahead. Let's say you got a bunch of early ganks off. You're very ahead. Nice. Shouldn't you be able to dominate the map? It should be well within your rights to push the opposing jungler off whatever you want to contest. That's the point and fun part of getting a lead in League of Legends. So there's no trick or hidden tech to stopping this from happening to you, but there are some ways you can mitigate the impact or make it harder for your opponent to really run away with the game when you're behind. The first is actually a way to quickly put off an enemy jungler from invading you, and that is to try and take your Gromp and Raptors as they're spawning as much as you possibly can. Why these two camps specifically? Think about it. When you're ahead and you're invading, you usually go in one of these two ways, right? Now, what happens when you see that the enemy Raptors are down? What immediately goes through your head? Most people will instinctively back off because they believe it's likely that the enemy jungler already cleared this quadrant of the jungle. It's the same thing with Gromp. If it's down, you can likely assume that wolves are gone too. But if you leave one of these camps up, the enemy jungle is way more likely to believe that there's a lot that they can steal here. This will cause them to fully commit to taking all your camps. The second thing you can do is probably the more important one. Stop having mental breakdowns if the opposing jungler is taking something you want when they're ahead. Take this Karthus game for example. He's got a massive lead over the Rammus and is well within his rights to take the blue buff. Rammus is not having any of that. He fully commits to a fight he cannot win and dies for it. Tilting over something you have zero control over anymore is not how you'll make a comeback. Yes, it sucks that there's nothing you can do, but don't make it worse for no reason. This isn't going to happen to you often, so just stay cool and wait for the enemy jungler to throw the lead your teammates gave them. Okay, to wrap this section up, here's the main takeaways. Don't tilt. As a jungler, you are still super impactful as long as you don't fall behind yourself. Avoid direct confrontation with the enemy jungler, and look for your own plays that can't be countered. To dissuade invades, take Gromp and Raptor on spawn as much as possible. And those are the best tips for dealing with an enemy jungler who got fed off your team. Now we can move on to the final thing we have to cover, the fed enemy laners. Goes without saying that if your opponent is getting more ganks off than you, then they now likely have winning lanes and you have losing ones. And you guys know how much that sucks. We're always going on and on about how you should never play around losing lanes, how you'll have no priority, etc. Typically this is true, but not so much in lower rated brackets. Let's break down why. The reason that losing lanes is so bad versus good players is that the strong laner and enemy jungle can sync up on that part of the map to take control over a lot of areas. This includes objectives there or invading your jungle. Typically, this looks very similar to this previous example we covered. Fed players should deny you from making plays to get your team back into the game. But think back to your own games. You maybe get your laner 1 or 2 kills, they seem well off, and then they instantly throw their lead the second you leave them alone. This all goes back to that concept that the winning junglers should be pushing in to deny the enemy jungle from having too many options. This way the winning teams pushing lanes aren't left exposed and don't throw their leads as easily. But as we covered, very few lower rated junglers actually pressure that often, which means that their winning lanes are likely just free kills for you to take. That is, of course, if you followed our previous rule to not fall behind yourself. This means that you can abuse winning lanes a lot of the time. Laners who are ahead want to have fun and stomp their opponent. They'll constantly push up and overextend to try and score kills. Ganking winning lanes isn't that hard a lot of the time. You might often just walk into a free kill. That is, of course, if you didn't fall behind, as we keep mentioning. The only time this wouldn't be true is if the enemy jungler put a snowballing stat check laner ahead. For example, let's say they ganked for their Draven Leona versus your Janna and Vayne. Draven is very snowbally, and there's not much to outplay in his kit during a gank. You either have the damage to kill him, or you don't. You would never try to salvage that lane if they're behind. You'll just get 3v2'd if you go down there. Another example would be a Fed Renekton. That champion is notorious for turning around ganks, so you might want to avoid pathing to that lane if Renekton is already ahead. But yeah, that's it. Yes, winning lanes can get out of hand, and you might just get steamrolled. It happens. However, in low elo, you can very often just score shutdowns off the lanes your opponent got ahead, so it's not usually that big of a deal. Again, keep your cool, and you'll have a fighting chance. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skill Capped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent Challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. Anyway guys, that's a wrap on this guide. We'll catch you in the next one. See ya!